Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Now, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6. Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it. Tries to roll it apart. Now he's going to throw it and score! Throws it to Payson in the end zone for the touchdown. They are throwing a play left-handed. Was rolling out on the run and threw it left-handed. Nard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Theo at the 35. Theo, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Theo, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. I'm your host, Josh Marlowe, here with you on a Wednesday night on what has become press conference night for us here on the podcast. A new feature we brought to you this season involves me recapping Bill Belichick's weekly press conference with the media. He hosts that on Mondays. We recap it here for you on Wednesday night. And tonight I've got 8 audio clips I'm going to bring to you from the coach's presser earlier this week, where he reviewed some of the film from the Charlotte win, provided an update on a key defensive lineman, talked about the running back room competition, and then looked ahead to this weekend's opponent, the Richmond Spiders. So glad that you're here with us. And let's go ahead and get right into tonight's press conference recap. As I mentioned, he looked back at the Charlotte game, and the head coach of the Tar Heels offered what stood out to him when they reviewed the film after Saturday's 20-3 win over the Charlotte 49ers.
No, I think that just there was some frustration that we weren't more consistent in our execution in all 3 phases, and we had some things that were really within our control that we could have done a better job of, and so we'll work on those and see if we can eliminate that both on the coaching end and on the playing end, and just have more efficient operation.
You go back to when Anthony and I recapped the game on Monday night, he was a lot more disappointed and frustrated in what Carolina put on the field against Charlotte. It wasn't the sexiest performance. They just scored 20 points. I thought they managed the game very well, but as you heard right there from Coach, it wasn't like he was pleased with what Carolina did. There was frustration within the coaching staff and the players with the lack of execution, which is a good thing. I don't know if years past, if that would have maybe been the same sentiment we would have heard from Mac Brown after talking about a 3-possession win, but you get that same kind of criticism right there from Bill Belichick. And so I think we do expect a much more cleaner offensive performance this week against Richmond, a much more explosive offensive performance against the Richmond Spiders as well. Speaking of the offense, he did also address the progress he thought they made on that side of the ball last Saturday night.
Again, more progress fundamentally. Again, doing more things better, more consistently, not where we need to be yet, but definitely headed on the right track. It was a short week. We didn't have a lot of, contact work. A lot of it was just kind of a carryover from the TCU game, trying to, get ready and get back going again. Hopefully this week with a little more preparation time and fundamental work, we'll be able to continue to make strides there. But, that's up to us. We still have to do it. But, I did think we made some progress, but, hopefully we need to make more, and we need to have more consistency in all 3 areas. but certainly on offense, that's a big key for us is our timing, our execution, and our fundamental play.
You hear it right there. The most important aspect he thought they took a step in the right direction was being more fundamentally sound. They've still got a long way to go. That's just the reality when you're playing as many guys as they're playing right now. Virtually switching offensive linemen, it feels like every other play. Same thing at the running back room. And even we've seen some rotation at the wide receiver spot. But they took a step in the right direction against Charlotte. I think the biggest thing was after the TCU game went as sideways as it did, just get some confidence in these guys, get some belief in these guys that they can be real impact players and that they can be an offense that can put up points and put up yards and be the type of offense they need to be for this team to win the type of games in ACC play that we expect them to win, which is, still 7-8 games or so here in year one of the Bill Belichick era. The biggest thing we've talked about so much leading up to the season and in the early weeks of the season is the evaluation process the players are still going through under the new head coach, under the coaching staff, with the front office that's put in place that evaluates everything. If you listen to Carolina Football Live, Michael Lombardi talked about that on Monday, how they evaluate every practice, every drill, just so they can continue to get a better grasp of what this team is and where they need to improve it in the upcoming season. But with this still being non-conference play, you're not going to play 4 TCUs. You're not going to play 4 schools from the Big 12, let alone 4 schools like a TCU that are capable of winning that conference. And so this was an interesting question, I thought, and then Coach gave a pretty legitimate answer. He was talking about, or he was asked about, how the skill level of the opposition impacts their evaluation of their own roster.
We can't really control who's on the other side of the ball. And whoever's there is there. We can't do anything about that. I think the big thing we look for is just the execution that our players are doing. Are they running the route at the right depth? Are they using the proper technique to get open? Are they blocking with proper leverage and hand placement and so forth? Are they defeating blocks or covering receivers the way they need to? It could look okay in a certain situation, but it's really not because it's not being done fundamentally properly, and eventually that's going to get exposed. So we're just really working hard to get better every day at everything we do, and there's certainly been a lot of improvement, but we're not where we need to be, and consistency is a big part of it. And so we'll continue to grind away and work on that. There's no real shortcut to it, but sure, competition's definitely a factor, but we can only control what we can control. And but I think we're doing things right, then we'll be able to compete against good competition. If we don't do them right, then it doesn't really matter probably much of who we're against, so we're going to have some problems.
There was some Belichickian in that answer where he talked about we can only control what we can control, but I think it does come down to what he values is that if we hone in on the fundamentals, if we master the basics of whatever technique it is on offense, defense, special teams, then we can play with anybody. And so, yes, it should look a lot more cleaner and crisp against a Charlotte. It should look a lot better this weekend against a Richmond, but it really just comes down to the repetition of doing the basics and doing the little things. And once Carolina, I think, gets that down, that's when I think you'll see this team really take that step forward that we want them to and that you expect to see a team to make under a head coach that won 6 Super Bowls, as a head coach, 2 more as a defensive coordinator, and is arguably regarded as the best coach in the history of football, especially at the pro level. Let's turn our attention now to the running back room. A lot of discussion about how they have utilized a bunch of different running backs, and Anthony and I believe that it's time to start condensing that down and running. Really, we want to see Davian Goss more involved, Damon June more involved. You want to use Caleb Hood too, that's fine. And so, Coach was asked about the state of the running back room after 2 weeks here in the regular season.
Well, it's a really competitive situation, and last year none of those guys got a whole lot of carries. When you have Hampton, you beat him, and they did that, and that was obviously the right thing to do. So it's hard to evaluate backs until they get an opportunity to run against real competition and break tackles and can use their run skills. What it looks like in practice is not always the same as in the game when there's live tackling. So we've got a feel for how that's going, but it's very competitive. I have confidence in all of them. They all, have shown a lot of good things, and that's why they've gotten playing time. We'll see how it works itself out.
He's not wrong that because of the presence of Amari and Hampton last year, Carolina's first-round running back selection, none of these guys got to see the football quite that often, and so they're running these guys to get a better feel for them and figure out which formations work, and all that. But at some point, this does have to come to an end, just because the offense will never find a rhythm. It'll never find an identity if you keep rotating guys at the rate that Carolina is rotating guys. I still think Davian Goss should be running back one for this team. That would be the guy that I would feature 15, 20 carries every single time out. But I want to see more Damon June. That's the guy that, runs hard, doesn't really think as much as he just puts his foot in the ground and finds either a hole or someone to run over. But that was very effective. He brought a level of physicality and explosive to the run game the other night. I think, with Caleb Hood, is he an explosive runner? No, but he could be a really good in between the tackles runner that could really be beneficial for Carolina in short yardage. Anthony's out on Benjamin Hall. I don't know if I'd say I'm out on him. I'm just not interested in seeing him as much as I am seeing Goss, June, and Caleb Hood. If Carolina's up 45-10, by all means, run him into the ground on Saturday. But I know they're trying to get a better evaluation for these dudes, but this offensive line's not going to get into a rhythm until they know who they're blocking for, and this running game will not get into a rhythm until these running backs are getting consistent carries, drive in, drive out, as opposed to getting rotated in and out like they've been so far through the first two games. We're halfway through this recap of Bill Belichick's press conference that he held on Monday ahead of this weekend's matchup against the Richmond Spiders. Let's now turn our attention to the defensive side of the football. A lot has been made about the absence of Price Yates, and Belichick tried to give his best about a timeline of when they can expect to get him back up front to help with this pass rush.
It's definitely hard to put a timetable on it. Yep. It's, I know that he's working hard to be back, and I know that our medical staff is doing the same thing. And we'll just have to kind of take it day by day and see how things progress. But when he's ready, he'll be ready, and I know he's doing everything he can to be ready, but it just hasn't been cleared yet.
Yeah, translation. It's going to be a while, I think, before we see Price Yates on the football field. Since Carolina has released a depth chart, he has been nowhere to be found, and that's a big blow for Carolina. As I mentioned on Monday nights when we were talking about the pass rush after it wasn't really all that successful against Charlotte, Stephen Belichick's going to have to scheme up pressure. That's just where Carolina's defensive line is at right now, which is why we told you when they lost Bo Atkinson, that was a bigger loss than the average Carolina fan wanted to admit. They just don't have the bodies, the war daddies up front, to win one-on-one battles at the rate that they're going to need to be the type of defense that they want to be. And so you got to be able to scheme pressure. You got to be able to disguise pressure. But, once you do that, once you're sending more guys than the opponent can handle, but if they pick those blitzes up, you now put that back. You put the secondary kind of in an island. And we saw what happened to Marcus Allen when he was playing a lot of one-on-one against ECU. That's the type of thing that you really open yourself up to. So I don't know how much Carolina has to do that this week. They should. They're the bigger, physical, stronger team, given the opponent coming up from the FCS ranks. But once they get to Central Florida, from there on out, they're going to have to scheme up pressure until Price Yates does, in fact, return, just simply because Carolina does not have the guys up front to win consistent battles to get into the backfield and put pressure on that quarterback. All right. We got two sound bites in regards to this week's opponent. We'll play the more general one here first. Here's what Bill Belichick had to say about the Richmond Spiders, who will invade Kenan Stadium this Saturday afternoon.
Richmond's an impressive team to watch. Coach Huseman's done a good job there, and they have a very experienced staff on the offensive side of the ball, of course, with Russ and his son Jacob, and Coach Wood, Coach Anthony on defense, special teams. They're very sound. Um, they haven't given up in really hardly any big plays defensively. Done a good job in the kicking game, made some plays. They're a good return team. They tackle well, and offensively they have um, a balanced running game between the quarterback and running backs, and then mix that in with some play action and getting the ball to receivers, especially guys like Dawson and on some plays, explosive plays that we'll have to defend. So really good program. They've had a lot of success there, and I can see why. They're a team that when you watch them again, you see the discipline, the toughness, the consistency, down in and down out, over multiple games, certainly last year, but, also the 2 games this year.
Yeah, we could equate Richmond to what you see maybe from like a James Madison in college hoops where, they're an FCS program, but they won't be afraid to come up to Carolina and compete. There's a lot of pride. There's a lot of tradition. They win at a high level. And so this is that rare FCS opponent where Carolina could probably actually take some things away what they do well on Saturday, and maybe some things where they're maybe not as clean as they want to be. And so, they have Carolina's full attention. I don't think this is going to be a team that Carolina's going to overlook and take slightly, especially considering what happened against TCU. I think they'll be eager to respond in what I hope will be a packed out Kenan Stadium and get that first home win for Bill Belichick as the head coach of the Tar Heels. That was the first piece of sound that Bill Belichick offered up about the opponent. Let's now turn a little bit more specifically where he talked about the challenge that their quarterback will present and their weapons in the pass game.
I mean, it's just kind of like a Ben Roethlisberger looking guy. I mean, he's really big, and he's strong. He's a physical runner. He's got stiff arm, long arms, tough guy to tackle, and he's a good downhill runner. So he doesn't shy away from contact. You gotta bring him down. So that'll be a big challenge for us, no doubt about it. They have a lot of other explosive players too, and that gives them a good balance where they can get the ball outside to their skilled players, the running backs, and then he carries it. And I'd say the other thing that's impressive about Richmond is their receivers. They do a great job blocking. And so a lot of times you count on those secondary players to be able to come up and get involved in the run force. They make it really hard for you to do that. They do a great job blocking. Again, the team's very well disciplined and tough. They're physically tough. So that'll be a big challenge for us.
So there you go. That's what Coach had to say about the offense. It's going to be really important when you get pressure on their quarterback that they hit him, but they hit him and they bring him down because he is a force behind there. And so it's going to maybe take 1, 2, 3 guys to really bring him to the ground. Nonetheless, you can't go in there and play patty cake with him. You got to hit him because he's tough and rugged, and it's going to take a lot to get him to the ground. And they do have playmakers on the outside. So Marcus Allen's got to be locked in. He's got to be the Marcus Allen we saw last week against Charlotte, because we're starting to see already teams aren't throwing at Thaddeus Dixon. He's proven to be the corner that he was at Washington. He owns his one side of the field. That means they're going to go after Marcus Allen. Expect him to roll some safety help over the top. I thought Gavin Gibson did a really good job last week for Carolina. Coleman Bryson's made plays at different points for the Heels as well. And so they got to be ready to go up front. They got to get pressure on the quarterback. They got to impact him. But they also got to be ready to go in the secondary because they do have the ability to make explosive plays in the passing game if Carolina, A, doesn't defend well, but B, if they don't tackle well. The last piece of sound is something that you saw the Tar Heel football account push out on Twitter, push out on social media, and it's been a common theme so far of Belichick's tenure as Carolina's head coach. Virtually every time he's gotten behind the microphone at a podium platform and kind of talked about all the changes that the program has undergone in just his short time on campus, he's always been careful to thank Chancellor Roberts for that. And he did that on Monday when he was kind of talking about getting the game ball from the Chancellor after getting his first win at the collegiate level against Charlotte a week ago.
I can't say enough about Chancellor Roberts and the support he's given and the backing for the program in many, many ways. He's been great, and I've really enjoyed working with him. Chris Clear also in the office, and and many of Chancellor Roberts' staff who have been, very helpful in the process. So again, it's a new era of college football. There are a lot of new things that we're dealing with, and there are also some changes at Carolina in general, from what I understand, in many things, from the game day presentation to obviously the revenue, NIL, and so forth. So we're kind of working our way through those, but he's been very helpful, supportive, and great all the way. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything more from him.
I think this is something that it's not a coincidence that Coach mentions this as often as he does. This is the first time that from the top of the academic structure at Carolina, that being the chancellor, that there's been someone that's committed to bringing winning football to the campus, at least in the modern era of college athletics, in the modern era of college football. And so, hopefully all the momentum that they built this offseason to not wipe away when the TCU game got away from Carolina on Labor Day night, because the chancellor is still committed to bringing big-time football here. And you saw with the pregame festivities and just the atmosphere leading up to the TCU game, it is possible for Carolina to generate a big game day atmosphere. And so, this is the type of chancellor that Mac Brown would have wished to have worked for his first time when he was in Chapel Hill back in the 90s. One of his big frustrations was just how they weren't as committed then as they are now to bringing big-time football to campus. And this is not going to change, folks, and it's why we encourage you. Yeah, TCU was rough, and it wasn't easy to be in that stadium and watch Carolina get waxed, but it's part of it. You got to take your lumps when you try to become a big-time football program. If we want to awake the sleeping giant, well, you got to be there for the hard times as well. And so that's why we're going to encourage you, if you have tickets for Saturday, be there, be loud, be present, make a difference. Cheer on this team, cheer on this coaching staff, continue to prove to the doubters that we can create a big-time football atmosphere here in Chapel Hill, because your chancellor is committed to bringing that to the university in one way or another. That is going to wrap up this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Do want to thank everyone that joined me here tonight. We'll be back next Wednesday for a press conference recap as Carolina will be getting ready for Central Florida. In the meantime, I will direct you to the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. Full coverage of Carolina's game this weekend against Richmond will be found there. Anthony will have you covered the preview and the recap and the injury report if Carolina does make anything known before kick. We'll keep you updated on the basketball side as well. We're getting closer and closer to the start of basketball season. We got the ACC schedule earlier this week. I wrote about that. You can go check that article out. So make sure you get to the website every single day. That's HeelToughBlog.com for the latest and best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find it. Everywhere you find your podcast, just search the Heel Tough Blog podcast, and you'll find it on every audio platform. But we are pushing the digital stuff. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the Facebook page, subscribe to the Twitter page as well. All those handles at Heel Tough Blog to make sure you get notified when we go live for every game preview, every game recap, or every press conference edition like I'm doing here today. With that, that is going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.